for the people that put people first. We worked on many policies to improve access to the health and well-being of Michiganders. One such package that I was a part of and championed was codifying 10 key elements of the Affordable Care Act, many which had bipartisan support, which many in Michigan have come to rely on. Requiring insurance coverage for preventative care services like cancer screenings and pap smears, prohibiting insurance companies from setting premiums based on pre-existing conditions, keeping adult children on their parents' insurance until age 26, and my bill prohibiting insurance companies from discriminating based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression are proving to be critical, proactive measures that were signed into law here in Michigan. And now that a president has been elected whose goal is to tear down ACA, this has never been a more critical time. Additionally, I am proud to have supported legislation to modernize our unemployment program in Michigan. We increased the weekly benefit maximum from $362 a week to $446 a week, and it will go up to $530 on January 1, 2026. After 23 years, just imagine 23 years of these benefits being frozen, it was long past time to update them. And with the federal government slashing thousands of federal jobs, including national parks in Michigan, people serving our veterans, and the educational sector at risk, these unemployment supports are critical. The Reproductive Health Act also passed through my committee, and I was one of the bill sponsors on that package as well. As many of our freedoms are being impacted at the federal level, the president has kicked many things back to the states. I have always believed that medical decisions should be between an individual and their healthcare provider, not politics. That we haven't tried many key elements to abortion access in our state with the passage of the RHA. This year, I am serving on the Appropriations Committee alongside my colleagues, Senator McCann and Representative Longjohn. Your entire delegation is on appropriations. I am the ranking member of the Medicaid and Behavioral Health Subcommittee and the ranking member of the Military and Veteran Affairs Appropriations Committee, as well as Higher Education and Community Colleges Subcommittees. Considering our conversation tonight, I feel like we have a prime seat to uplift the critical funding so many of our programs desperately need. Over the last few months, we have either seen or read the headlines about what is going on in Washington, and right now, it has been a lot of chaos and uncertainty. We have seen a proposal to slash Medicaid at the federal level by $880 billion with a B dollars. This will not be backfilled with state money. We do not have a big enough rainy day fund to backfill this. And I'm sorry my intent is not to invoke fear. It is to state the facts. And I'm so thrilled that you're here to learn from us today, to collectively hear from you what is on your minds and how you are being affected, and to stand up and fight back. 72% of the state DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services budget is federal pass-through dollars. 42% of the general fund is state pass-through dollars. That's why I say we do not have a bucket big enough to backfill, and our local electeds and local government will feel that as well. Recently, we saw the Attorney General join 23 other states in many lawsuits across the country, including the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and Secretary Kennedy, after the department illegally terminated nearly $11 billion in critical public health grants nationwide. As the Minority Vice Chair of Medicaid and Behavioral Health, I am committed with my colleagues to meet with stakeholders and our federal partners to learn strategies to protect these dollars as best we can. Given this, there are so many uncertainties that have people worried. We have all heard about the mass firings of federal employees, some which we may even know personally. Many of you have reached out to our offices already, uplifting these issues and telling your stories of how these actions will impact you and your family. Tonight, Attorney General Dana Nessel is here to provide an update on the cases her office is involved in and how together we can continue to fight against these actions. Let's give a warm round of applause to our Attorney General, Dana Nessel.
Western Michigan University for hosting us here tonight. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to come out to the West Side and to talk a little bit about the work that we've been trying to do at the Department of Attorney General. Let me start off by saying a few things here, just generally speaking. You know, I absolutely recognize, and we should recognize that Donald Trump is the duly elected president of the United States, and with that position comes broad power and broad authority, and there are a lot of things that you can do as president of the United States. However, this president, just like all presidents since Marbury v. Madison was rendered back in 1803 by the United States Supreme Court, it is beholden to the judiciary in terms of what they can and can't do. And I think it goes without saying, the things that the president and the executive branch can do must be done within the confines of the law.
Amen.
You have the ability to advance your policies, but you can't do it by violating the Constitution. You can't do it by violating federal law. You can't do it by violating federal rules and regulations like the Administrative Procedures Act. You must abide by the law just like everybody else has to do. And part of bringing these lawsuits is because, yes, absolutely, Donald Trump, won the Electoral College. He won the popular vote. He won the state of Michigan by some 80,000 votes. But I won the state of Michigan by 370,000 the Constitution, and that's what I'm doing now. It is my oath to protect the people of this state from harm, from injury. And so when you ask yourself, like, when I hear about all of these lawsuits, under what circumstances are you bringing these lawsuits? Well, here's the calculus that I generally use when making a decision whether or not to bring a lawsuit or to participate in a lawsuit. Number one, whether I like the policy of the president or the federal government, whether I think it's harmful for our state or whether it's good for our state. Is it illegal? Is the way that this policy has been advanced, has it been done illegally? And if so, is there a concrete, specific harm that has been done either to the state of Michigan or the people of the state of Michigan? And are there good claims? And if so, then I believe that it is incumbent upon me in this position to bring litigation on behalf of our state and of course on behalf of the people of our state. And so I have done that, and I have done it on a number of occasions. I'm gonna, before I get to all the numbers, I will say that we have filed litigation now where we are a party to 9 lawsuits, probably 10 as of tomorrow. And we filed amici briefs supporting other parties that have standing to bring lawsuits in support of them. Well, we have a dozen here, but I think we might have added 1 or 2 since I see. All right, we sent a letter to Congress today, but I know we have some more amici in the works. But those are the numbers, so that you can keep track of these cases, because these are important and it can be overwhelming. And I know there's always like, what's going on? I know that there was this case brought or that case brought, but I don't know what the status is. And there's so much, right? We're being overwhelmed, we're being inundated each and every day with so much information. and misinformation as well. But if you want to keep track of our lawsuits, there's an easy way to do it. We created a web tracker as part of our website, and that's mi.gov/AG federal actions. So if at any time you want to know what the status of a case is, that's where you can take a look. But so you might ask yourself, and let's start with this, how much money has it cost the state to bring these lawsuits? Well, I have a specific number for you. That's $2,433 as of right now. How is that possible? Well, you know, unlike the president and some of his staff that disparages public servants, I have some of the very best lawyers and paralegals and administrative staff, I would argue, not just anywhere in the state, but anywhere in the world in my office. And I have people that are working, you know, I get emails at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning from my staff routinely, sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning. People work weekends. People are working fast and furiously, but I have not gone out and hired additional staff. And we are not paying much in additional money with the exception of the cost for us to file a pro hoc vici motion in order to practice in another jurisdiction. So that's where that money comes from. But I think you'll see as we go through these cases that you know, we're saving the state and the people of our state a lot of money, but we're not spending much to do it. So what lawsuits have we brought? Well, we started, unfortunately, with the executive orders that were signed on Inauguration Day for the president. One of those involved the elimination of birthright citizenship. Now, you may or may not know from history class, birthright citizenship is actually part of our Constitution. It's in the 14th Amendment, black and white. It cannot be undone simply with the swipe of one's Sharpie on an executive order. And, you know, this is an important, you know, part of our Constitution, and it came in the wake of the end of slavery, and it was to ensure that the children of enslaved people could be considered Americans, which they otherwise wouldn't have been. And why does this matter to Michigan? Well, each year we have about 6,000 babies that are born in the state who, but not for birthright citizenship, would be totally stateless, meaning they wouldn't have a country they belong to at all. And that costs the state a lot of money. There are federal funds that go to reimburse us for costs of, you know, education and foster care and medical care for these babies, and that's only because they are citizens. Now, why this is also of particular importance is because, of course, it's so hard to amend the Constitution. You had to have 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and then it had to go to the states, and 3/4 of those states had to ratify. So to say that you can change the Constitution by literally just the signing of an executive order is really terrifying and totally undermines the way that our Constitution works and operates. And again, this would cost the state a lot of money, in addition to the basic inhumanity of telling, you know, innocent newborn babies that they have literally no nation to which they belong. So we brought that case. Within a matter of hours, we received injunctive relief. The Reagan-appointed judge on the bench actually said that it was the most flagrant violation of the Constitution he'd seen in over 40 years on the bench. So there's an injunction in place, but that case remains pending. The next case that we brought involved an action by the Office of Management and Budget. The acting director on January 27th issued notice that funding to the states for all kinds of critical programming would be paused for an indefinite period of time, starting the next morning. And what did that include? Well, you might know, and of course Representative Rogers referenced this, that 42% of our budget is funded by the federal government. And that goes to all sorts of programs, such as Medicaid, which about 2.7 million people are on in Michigan, or Head Start, or our FEMA funding for emergency services. The list goes on, Meals on Wheels. I mean, the list goes on and on and on as to all the kinds of programming that was stopped immediately. The funding was paused. Again, no notice, except for a memo that came in the evening and was, stopped in the morning. The participants in the programs were not given any notice. The states, agencies that administer these programs, not provided any notice. Even the federal agencies that administer the programs were given no notice. And I think really important, of course, to remember how, is the federal government, are they just these, benevolent overlords that provide us with all of this funding? Where does that money come from? Oh, that's right, it comes from us, right? And the people, the residents of this state and businesses in the state pay over $30 billion to the federal government every year, and it comes back to us in the form of these programs. So I guess my question is, if they're going to cut off all the federal funding to the state, what the hell are we doing April 15th? I mean, why are we paying taxes to the federal government if none of that money is going to come back to us? So we filed a lawsuit literally the next morning, and we almost immediately got injunctive relief. And the court indicated that the funding would have to resume immediately, and for the most part it did. We had to file a few motions to enforce because there was not complete compliance by the federal government, but for the most part this funding, at least for the meantime, has resumed. There are further actions, and there's some back and forth between the DOJ and the various states that are participants. But in the meantime, many of these programs, including, I should mention, SNAP, 1.5 million people in our state receive SNAP benefits, food assistance benefits. So this would have been just absolutely crippling for our state. The next case that we brought involved the National Institute of Health, who on a Friday evening on February 7th provided notice that they were going to significantly reduce the NIH grants that go to so many different universities and healthcare facilities, research facilities in our state. We have, for instance, about 18,000 NIH-supported clinical trials that are being run in Michigan. Everything from cancer and epilepsy and post-traumatic stress disorder outcomes for veterans. I mean, the list goes on and on. $2.5 million of that dollars that goes to Western Michigan, but at some of the larger universities, the University of Michigan, $181 million. I'm sorry, that's not the total amount. This is the amount that would have been lost immediately. So that would have been $181 million to the University of Michigan, $27 million to Michigan State, $18 million to Wayne State. So a significant amount of money that would have just literally overnight been lost in terms of, these are negotiated grants. These are contracts, right? Let's call it what they are. They are contracts that the federal government themselves negotiated and promised this money to these various different universities and facilities, and then overnight said, we are going to break our contract with you. So we filed that case. Michigan was one of the lead states on that on the Monday morning after, and we immediately received a temporary restraining order so that these grants would resume. The next case that we brought involved an agency some of you may have heard of called DOGE. Michigan was also a lead state on this. We filed this case against an unelected billionaire by the name of Elon Musk, who was, been marauding through our federal departments and agencies, and, with his sort of, I guess, contingency of 22-year-olds that, not vetted, not properly trained, their equipment has not gone through the regular processes to ensure that it can't be hacked, that critical information, personal information, our social security numbers, our bank accounts, and of course for people who are on Medicaid or Medicare, all of their personal medical information just downloaded into these unsecure servers, shared with an AI program. And that's just our personal information, not to mention our national secrets, confidential information from the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. So we filed this action in the DC District Court. We were making some good progress on it. It has been stayed in the circuit court right now, but we continue to argue that it is inappropriate for somebody to oversee these operations that was never formally appointed by the president, was never confirmed by the Senate, which is required, and has this vast authority that has been provided to him. So we continue to argue that that is a violation of the Constitution, and we will continue to make those arguments in court. The next case that we filed involved the federal firings, the risk reduction in force of our federal workers. Tens of thousands of federal workers in the state of Michigan, of course, that do all kinds of things. And why, why is that a violation of the law? Well, first of all, if you are a probationary worker, the law requires that you be given 60 days notice. And why is that? Well, it's for all kinds of reasons, right? If it's a not for cause firing. And one of those is that so you can maybe have an opportunity to get another job. But how it impacts us and impacts the state of Michigan is those people, when they get fired without notice, they have to apply for unemployment insurance through the state. And that can be, in the case of these firings, hundreds if not thousands of people all at once. And many of those people, because they're not given an opportunity to get another job or even transfer their health care, say, to their spouse or what have you, they end up having to go on Medicaid, which again, the state partially pays for that. So it's injurious to the state, and I'd argue it's injurious to not just the state because those people are no longer paying their taxes because they're not employed, but also the trickle-down effect to all of our communities. If you don't have a job, you're probably not going out to eat in restaurants. You're not spending money in a shopping mall or stores. It has a massive impact. And again, it violates the law. There's a reason why there is this 60 days, and even worse, I should say, is the fact that many of these people were told that they had performance-related issues when we know that that was a lie. What a terrible thing to do to a worker who has to get a new job. And here they've been told you have performance issues and we're firing you. And how difficult it is to go on and get a new job from there, and just how repugnant it is for our federal government to do that to people who have worked hard on behalf of the good people of this country. So we filed that case, and we first were granted injunctive relief, and these people, were being made to be rehired. And even if they were going to be on administrative leave, that's 60 days that at least they would have to be paid for. And again, understanding that, these people were fired in such an arbitrary and capricious manner, without rhyme or reason. There was no understanding of like, oh, I see, well, we've done a review, it's been an exhaustive review, and we know that we have enough Social Security Administration workers, we know we have enough people who are performing this kind of work at the VA. It was just random, as we know. And of course, many of those people had to be rehired. And of course, my favorite example of this is when they fired most of the people from the sea lamprey program without apparently checking to see, like, what are sea lamprey? Are sea lamprey good? Do we want more sea lamprey in our state? Is that a good thing to have in our Great Lakes? And then they actually ended up having to rehire a bunch of those people, understanding that it would have been cataclysmic, of course, for the Great Lakes and for our commercial fishing industry, recreation, tourism, on and on and on. So we won that case initially, and that we were able to secure injunctive relief. Since that time, unfortunately, that's been stayed in the Fourth Circuit. But again, while many of these issues go back and forth, we are going to proceed on this case because we think it's incredibly important that the president comply with the law. The next case that we brought involves the Department of Education. And at first, they were just going to lay off just half the people in the Department of Education. And then that was followed by, oh wait, we're just gonna get rid of it altogether. As you probably know, they administer countless programs to the states, but also they distribute $1.4 billion to the state of Michigan annually. And of course, when this was done, there was really no explanation of exactly how were those programs going to be implemented. Remember, these are programs, these are part of federal law and state law. This is not discretionary. These are programs that have to be administered by the school districts, and no understanding or indication of exactly how this would happen or how we would receive the money. So that case is ongoing. The next case that we brought.
Sorry, real quick. We had a question in the back. If you could explain to the crowd what a stay means in court. A lot of people were unfamiliar with that term.
Thank you, I will. A stay is just kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's when you bring an action and the court might issue a ruling, but then a higher court will stay the ruling, meaning pause that ruling, so that ruling doesn't go into effect immediately. So the point of getting a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction means that there's irreparable harm going on, and we need the court to issue a ruling in contravention of whatever this policy is immediately, so that the harm doesn't occur. When there's a stay, it's usually a court of higher jurisdiction saying, we're going to pause that ruling by the lower court judge, and the case is going to proceed, the case will move forward, but we're not going to have the court intervene, meaning if you brought back the federal workers and have to pay them, by staying that, it's like saying, no, they can go ahead and lay those people off, but they still have a case. They still have a case, and we're going to hear the case, but the case has to, the evidence has to be presented, and the briefs have to be filed, and we have to fully hear the claims, and the court has to make a decision as to whether they're meritorious or not before that court's ruling can go into action. So I hope that makes sense to people. So the next case we brought involved public health grants. This is some $380 million in public health grants to the state of Michigan that were terminated. And what did these grants do? Well, let me just give you an example of some of them. A mental health grant to support services for those fighting serious mental illness, including children. A substance abuse grant to enhance substance use disorder services for pregnant women with young children, opioid users, rural populations. CDC funding for the control of emerging infectious diseases, and that involves laboratory upgrades for various health departments all across the state. In fact, 45 local health departments that were impacted, including 46 local community mental health programs. So we had received almost an immediate order that these were to resume. And so we are awaiting further instructions from the court on this one at this point. The next one we brought involved an executive order involving elections, where basically the president decided just to override the law that, has always been that elections are administered by the states, and the states regulate the time, place, and manner of elections. You might remember that in 2018 and then again in 2022, we had really significant ballot proposals where we said things like we want to have no reason absentee voting. We want to have 9 days of early voting. We want to have more time for those who are serving in the military who are overseas to be able to cast their ballot, and things of that nature. We, the people in Michigan, made those decisions, and our contention is that the sua sponte, and the president, without even having the support of Congress, can't just decide on his own that he's going to override the Constitution and override the will of the voters in our state. And so we, and let's be clear about all of these, by the way. These are all separation of power related issues, right? You might remember that we have 3 co-equal branches of government. And I don't know that the president fully grasped that. And I don't even know if Congress knows about it. They are actually Article 1 of the Constitution, the very first one, delegated to Congress. And so these are almost everything I'm talking about here, that there are so many of these things that had the president decided to do this legally, he could have. But when you're talking about things like grants, for instance, or when you're talking about things like government agencies, like not just the Department of Education, but the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, those are congressionally created agencies. And theoretically, you could have Congress creates the budget, right? So you could say for the next budget, the president could say, he obviously has majorities in both the House and the Senate, he could say, I don't want to provide these grants anymore. And if those grants had expired, or if he didn't want to provide funding for things like Medicaid or for SNAP, again, in the next budget, he could say, well, I want to provide less money or no money. But he doesn't on his own get to just say, well, I don't care what happened with the last budget that was passed by Congress. I decided I don't like that budget. And so all of this money that was legally appropriated by Congress to the states, I'm going to upend all of that because I don't like what you guys did last year. I mean, he could do that. Or if he wanted to get rid of the Department of Education, he could say, hey, House and Senate, why don't you pass a bill eliminating the Department of Education, and I'll sign that. But you know why he doesn't do that? He doesn't have the votes. He doesn't have a majority in both chambers to enact his policies because many of them are wildly unpopular, even with his own party. And so that's why he uses these executive actions in order to fulfill his agenda. Because if you had to go through Congress, you would never be able to do this stuff. And that's why so often this is a violation of the separation of powers. And we have, in addition to that last case, we just finished going through these, we brought a case on behalf of the elimination of a number of other agencies, including the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the Minority Business Development Agency, the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services Agency. Just in terms of the libraries and museums, Michigan receives over $5 million in grants to the state from that agency. That accounts for about 75% of all federal funding that supports our libraries all around the state of Michigan. So, of course, just to cut this off immediately, this has an impact all over the state of Michigan. And so that's why we brought that case. We have a case that we're likely to bring soon involving ESSER money or educational money that went to schools in the wake of COVID to assist with all kinds of things like, for instance, HVAC systems, so that, you had schools that were safer from a respiratory standpoint, from many different standpoints. The thing about it is, and this is about $41 million, that money was already spent because these grants were provided, and now go back and say, oh, that money that you were supposed to get and you counted on, you're not going to get that anymore. And now you got to find some other way to pay for it through your school district. And it's hard. And it's hard. This is about a federal government that breaches all of its contracts. And if you were a business and you conducted your business this way, where people put time, money, effort, sweat equity into applying for this money, and then you had the government say, yep, you are going to receive this money, but then later on was like, yoink, just kidding. If that was a business, you would never do business with that particular entity anymore. You say, I can't trust them. I can't trust that they're going to fulfill their end of the bargain. In essence, that is what these executive actions has done, is to say, like, it doesn't matter what your expectation was, we are going to violate the terms of all of these federal grants and contracts so that you can't ever necessarily count on the federal government to keep up their end of the deal. And that is not a federal government that any of us who live in the United States can rely on. So those are just the cases that we've brought. We have so many other amicus briefs that we've brought on so many different cases, but we would be here literally for another 4 hours just from talking about it. And of course, we want to hear from all of you. But those are some of the actions that we've brought. There will surely be more to come. We have had, obviously, some activity lately from all of these actions from the Supreme Court. And some of what we've been told is in some sorts of actions, when you have a case that's been brought by a party, whether it be a state, whether it be nonprofits, whether it be labor unions, whoever is bringing that case, if it involves a federal contract, then in many of those situations, if you don't have other claims that you're making outside of the pure money aspect, the funding aspect, that those cases should go to the Federal Court of Claims. So I think it's important to know these cases were not dismissed in that we were told on the merits there is, there is no opportunity for you to be successful, but some of these cases were being told have to be refiled in a court of differing jurisdiction. And I know that's a lot of legal terms, but it's just to say we've not lost any cases, even if you've read things about the Supreme Court and their rulings. It's just basically saying in some of these situations it has to be moved from the federal district court to the Federal Court of Claims to pursue actions there. So with that, I'm going to allow for other people to talk. Thank you so much again, Representative Rogers, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. So thank you, everyone. And I will say additionally, I'd love the opportunity at some point to address what's being shouted at us right now, because I think it's important to talk about. So, and it is relevant to some of the things that we're discussing. So I'd like that opportunity as well, please.
Thank you. I would like to make an announcement because we are in Michigan, in Kalamazoo. We have some sleet and inclement weather. There is a black Jeep Grand Cherokee with their windows down, so if that is you may want to go out and come back. We will let you back in, I promise. If that is you, you may want to roll your windows up. So again, thank you so much, Attorney General, for your remarks, and we do have a couple of local examples that we want to kick it off with, but we will have a half hour for Q&A. So I would like to first have Jenny Dozema with Kalamazoo Climate Coalition talk about the freezing of a federal grant. If you would like to kind of fill us in on what's been going on with that, and then maybe the Attorney General can comment.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Dozema from the Kalamazoo I am a motivating friend.
I don't know if the microphone is on, we cannot hear you.
It is, but I mean, I'll keep on screwed.
All right.
There we go.
Jenny Dozema, Executive Director of the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition. Our mission is to mobilize collective action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and support renewable energy through a transition grounded in social, racial, economic, and environmental justice. Before sharing my brief statement, I want to thank you, Julie Rogers, for holding this town hall, and express my appreciation to Attorney General Nessel for being here today, especially for all the support in helping to bring and keep grant funding to many communities across our state. We and Kalamazoo County are a recipient of a U.S. EPA Climate and Environmental Justice Change Grant, 18.9. $18.9 million. The Community Change Grant funding, which Congress authorized, totaled over $82 million federal dollars for projects in Detroit, Benton Harbor, Kalamazoo, and 3 tribal organizations spanning over 11 counties and 7 federally recognized tribes. These Michigan grantees are committed to providing benefits to the state and our communities with projects that not only include greenhouse gas emissions reduction, but also workforce development, specifically skilled on-the-job training in construction, basic electric and energy efficiency home repairs, which will ultimately lead to career placement for at least 200 individuals residing in the communities being served. Transforming houses of worship, public and tribal buildings and neighborhood centers into resilience hubs by investments in energy-saving building improvements and green infrastructure. These buildings will provide neighbors refuge during extreme weather events and reduce reliance on government emergency services. Economic expansion opportunities with small businesses, contractors, and suppliers, and support energy efficiency upgrades for over 300 homes here in Kalamazoo County. The challenge to us is during these past couple months, we have experienced intermittent freezing and termination of federally obligated funds without notice or explanation. We currently don't have access to our funds. It's our understanding from internal EPA documents that all Michigan CCG grants are targeted for termination. This will impact our ability to realize those benefits I just talked about. These multiple disruptions have made it difficult to hire staff, pay existing staff and contractors and other invoices, and issue RFPs for contractors, causing significant delays in moving forward in compliance with these large projects in the 3-year grant period. Again, I want to thank you and reiterate my gratitude to you for fighting hard to bring and keep funding in our communities, and ask you, Attorney General Nessel, if you will help us.
All the hard work you do on behalf of the communities that you serve, and I think that all of us in this room, I hope, appreciate and understand the value of that work. And I am greatly concerned about the termination of these grants. And again, I think it's important for people to know, like, when these grants are terminated, it's not even as though in most instances you don't even get an email saying your grant's being terminated. You find out when you draw down on the funds and they're just not there. That's when you find out about it. I will say that there are a number of other cases that we're contemplating, we're reviewing. It's just oftentimes, sometimes we've been able to turn things around on a dime and get something filed the next day. Sometimes it takes us weeks to be able to do it and to formulate our claims and work with the other states and ensure that we have the best possible legal product, which is really what we want most of the time, if we can possibly, get it. Obviously, in some instances, like the OMB case, where you're talking about billions of dollars overnight, we had to get something filed immediately. But we are doing our best in all those circumstances, again, to look at a couple of things, right? One, does it violate the law? And two, does it harm the people of our state? And in some instances, I should tell you, where there is grants where the money has gone from the federal government to the state government, and then the state government has actually administered those grants, what concerns me as the lawyer who represents the state of Michigan is, how do we get the state out of being sued? Because at the end of the day, it's the state oftentimes that money flows through. Sometimes it comes right from the federal government, but oftentimes it goes from the state to from the federal government to the state, and then we're the ones that, say, yes, you're approved for this grant, and the money stops coming from us to us, and then we can't provide that money. So we are evaluating a host of new cases based on some of the grants that you're talking about, and in the cases, in the instances where we can bring a lawsuit, we will. But let me say this, and it's very important for people to know, you have to be communicating with our department. And it's important that when this happens, we often don't even know about it. And I will just tell you, I had a roundtable with Representative Rogers and a bunch of people from Western Michigan to talk about grants that were terminated that I'd never heard of before. Now, why does that matter? Because, of course, for me to have standing to bring a case, I got to know about these particular injuries being inflicted on our state. So it's important to communicate with our office to let us know, here are the grants that we were awarded, and here are the grants that, without notice, we've stopped being able to draw down on because we don't have funding anymore.
Thank you for uplifting that. We also have a story from Cody Williams. Cody, if you'd like to stand, and we'll bring a microphone over to you to talk about Department of Education grants.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cody Williams. I'm a faculty member here at Western Michigan University, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself tonight. I want to thank Julie Rogers and her staff for inviting me, and the Michigan Attorney General, Nessel, for being here. I want to give a little bit of background information first. So there, in the state of Michigan, we have 95,000 or over 95,000 multilingual learner students in our state, and those are students whose first language is something other than English. Teachers need to have specialized training in order to provide the instruction to those students, and in order for them to develop their English language skills. Many would argue that the class size of one teacher to 30 students is pretty large and overly large, but even to get to that level, we would need to have 3,200 teachers trained in the state to provide that. We have less than half that number of teachers that are trained to support those students. A key response to that issue then is the National Professional Development Grant Program that's funded by the U.S. Department of Ed. It's out of the Office of English Language Acquisition there at the Department of Ed. And this program is connected to statute under Title III of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and it specifically funds recruiting and training teachers to support English language learner students. We've received 2 grants from that program here at Western since 2017, and have successfully trained 152 teachers to certification in Michigan. And over the past 6 years, we've been in 150 classrooms of those teachers and seen that they are implementing practices that are supportive of those students. We know that these projects are working and that they are providing teachers with the skills that they need. However, recently all of the staff at the Office of English Language Acquisition at the U.S. Department of Ed were all laid off without notice. And so while these grants haven't been officially canceled yet, our concern is that they're not going to be renewed coming up in September here, because without any staff at the department, it's hard to imagine that they'll actually be able to renew those grants. So I guess my comment with all of this is that if President Trump and federal leaders are serious about his recent executive order declaring that English is the official language of our country, and that we should make it a policy to have people learn English and use English in this country, we need more teachers, not less teachers, to be able to do that. And so the last thing I'll say is these grants aren't just serving multilingual learners here in West Michigan. They're serving teachers and students all across the state. There's similar grants at Wayne State University that have been funded where they're also training teachers and undergraduate students to get ESL endorsements. So I think that this attack on education funding needs to stop. Thank you.
Being talked about a little bit, and which is a significant concern to me, is that the way that our universities especially are under threat. My offer is always, again, to bring these cases on behalf of the people of our state. But what I have been seeing, unfortunately, and this is a bit of a trend, is universities that feel so threatened that they believe that if they cooperate with the Democratic Attorney General who's suing the Trump administration, that there will be a price to pay, and that they will exact punishment in some way by terminating more grants for that particular university. And this is a deep concern, but I want to say this, and I think it's a point that needs to be made. I truly believe that the University of Michigan, when they move forward with abolishing their DEI program, I truly believe they did so thinking, well, now the Trump administration will leave us alone. Because look what we've done. Aren't you happy with this? We completely abolished a program that you didn't like. So now you're not going to cut any more of our NIH funding. Now you're not going to cut any more of our educational grants. Now you're not going to do anything else to harm our university because we capitulated. And the thing that's important to know is, and this is an old Winston Churchill quote, but an appeaser is one who feeds the crocodile, hoping that he will be eaten last. And I think the problem is that there is really no such thing with this administration as giving them what they want in the hopes that they will not continue to terminate grants or funding. It just continues nonetheless. And the only way that we can really push back is by doing it cooperatively, all of us together, understanding how these cuts and these policies are hurting everybody in our state, not just Democrats, right? This hurts everyone, and it's not just some communities, and it's not just some races, and it's not just people who look a certain way or live in a certain particular area. It's literally the entirety of our state. And when people understand and appreciate that, they will see there really is no appeasing an administration that does not care about the needs of the people who live in our state. And that's why we really have to come together, because we can address this, bit by bit, but when you have one of these issues, we have to know about it, and we have to file lawsuits, because the courts can issue, obviously, a particular court order, and our hope at this point still is that the administration will abide by that court order. And if not, we're just in a full-blown constitutional crisis. But I don't think you can rely on the administration to go soft on you because you gave them one thing or another thing that they wanted.
We have time for some additional questions, so if you have one, if you will raise your hand, and we'll come around with microphones, but we'd like you to keep your comment kind of succinct so we can get to as many as possible.
I have somebody coming up from back in the side here.
I am very concerned about the say back that is going on in Congress right now. As a woman who was married and changed her name, I don't know. And I also, to tag on to that, I am a very concerned citizen about everything the federal government's doing and violating the Constitution, pretty much everything they do multiple times a day. What can we do to stop it? And same with Congress. The Congress people are turning over their powers into the Constitution given to them to set the budget to Trump. And we need to fix this. What can we as concerned citizens do?
But I have to say, what I truly believe, first of all, we have to get the Republicans in Congress, who still, of course, are in majority for both chambers, we have to have them understand that they don't represent Donald Trump, they represent all of us. And it's up to them to do their jobs and to make sure that the people of their respective states, their respective districts, are properly represented. And part of that is from all of you, and making sure that Bill Huizenga hears what you have to say, and knows that he's not going to stay in that office unless he's representing the people of his district. So that's incredibly important to make your voices heard and to make sure that you are lighting up the phones and sending emails and sending letters and doing all of those things. I know you've been doing those things, but let me speak to something, a larger issue, and it's something that that we had somebody in the back who I wanted to make known. I think we have to talk for a second about the importance of these rallies and the importance of lawful, peaceful protests, like what we saw on Saturday, last Saturday. We had these events. They were all over the state of Michigan. They were all over the United States, right? Dozens and dozens of them. Just in major metropolitan areas, I think there were like 5 in the Upper Peninsula alone. Strength in numbers, right? So we had well over 5 million people all across the United States of America.
Thank you for saying the correct number. A lot of people aren't, so I appreciate that.
So, and to any of you who participated, for any of you who helped organize these events, thank you for all of that, because it's important to show just how many studies have shown that all it takes is about 3.5% of the population of a country that is sliding into an autocracy to change that dynamic and to have people understand we're not going to put up with this, we're not okay with this, we're not okay with you taking away our health care, we're not okay with you taking away our Social Security, we're not okay with you taking away our public system of education, we're not okay with you depriving us of the right to vote or depriving us of our civil liberties. And so showing that by being out in full force, so that even somebody who doesn't respond to your emails or your phone calls, like Congressman Huizenga, will get the message if there are enough people out there. But again, to address something that was brought up before, I want to talk about protesting. Now, people are familiar with the cases that my department charged at the University of Michigan. None of those people are charged with lawfully or peacefully protesting. It's important that people know that. And it's important that people know that they should be out making their voices heard in the way of protesting. And that is important. But you can't be defacing property and causing property damage. You can't be assaulting a police officer. These are not the ways that we change hearts and minds, right? And so you get a permit, which communities all over the state are providing those permits, and there are First Amendment entitlements when it comes to getting granted those permits, but then you stay within the boundaries of that permit, whatever those are, time, place, and manner. And the great thing about the United States and the First Amendment is that it provides us so many opportunities to protest. We don't need to be committing crimes when we're doing it. And if you do, people have to understand that is what civil disobedience is it's being held accountable legally if and when you violate the law. And I just have to say this, I don't think that we are going to get anywhere with this administration or with the public at large if we're assaulting police officers. I don't subscribe to that. I don't think we ought to be doing it. And if we want police officers to act the way that we need them to behave, which of course is to respect the rights of protesters, then we have to treat them respectfully too and allow them to do their jobs. And if we don't, then I think we're going to be in a really dire set of circumstances. So I do hear people screaming at me, drop the charges, but what I don't hear is that these individuals are innocent of the charges that have been filed against them. And I think it's important to note, these are cases that have been brought in a public court, right? That is open to the public. Anybody can listen to the evidence. Dozens and dozens of witnesses who have testified. These are individuals who are been provided due process under the law. Hours and hours and hours of videotapes that have been played, for the district court judge who's evaluating these. And again, no one is charged with peaceful protesting. But if you're going to go out and you're going to assault a police officer, then you are going to get charged with a crime. And I think it has to be known and understood that we don't have to do that to make our voices heard.
As well, and I just have a quick question. Could you guys speak on anything you know about tariffs between Canada and the U.S. and how it's affecting Michigan, particularly with energy, because my consumer energy bill is going up.
I wish I could tell you that was why your consumer's bill is going up. I will tell you that consumers has gotten a recent rate increase, not by me, by the Public Service Commission, the Michigan Public Service Commission. I fight every single solitary attempt to increase rates by the utilities. And I make them prove their case to the Public Service Commission. Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose, sometimes we kind of split the baby in half, I guess I would say, in terms of, if they ask for $100 million and I say you deserve $0, they get awarded $50 million. Now, there are times, absolutely, where, a rate increase is merited and they need that to harden the grid or to trim trees, but they don't need it so that they can charter private jets for their executives to fly around the country, which is something that they sometimes ask for. So in terms of how Canada is being tariffed in terms of energy, my understanding is that there has been some exceptions that have been made specifically for that, and that's probably why Line 5 is still running. At this point, it's very hard to predict because, again, we have a federal government that when you ask, like, what is the tariff for this particular industry in this particular country, like, well, what time is it? Because any given time, like, I don't have my phone on me right now, so I can't tell you whether or not we have tariffs or don't have tariffs on a number of different countries.
Well, let's make a deal.
But I will say that I think that rate increase is probably likely due to the recent rate increase that was provided by the Public Service Commission. And even though they've not even begun to spend that money yet, they just asked for another one, which we are going to oppose that one as well.
question right here.
Can you explain how the lawsuits work? Is there partisan breakdown of the lawsuits, or are they all class lawsuits? Like, if Michigan wins, do all 50 states win on that issue? I don't know how
That
it
is a
works.
fabulous question, and I'm so glad that you asked it. So, for instance, in the birthright case, right? That case, there was a national injunction that was provided right away. So even though only the the states with Democratic AGs, because the Republican AGs have not been willing to file any of these lawsuits, even though I would argue that it would benefit their states to bring many of these cases. So what started to happen was that most of these injunctions were just issued as national injunctions. Now, the birthright case has been appealed to the Supreme Court on the issue of, should this be national injunctive relief, or should it only go to the plaintiff states, the states that actually filed the lawsuit? And what we are seeing now more and more is the courts are saying, no, that relief will only go to the states that filed the lawsuit. So I feel bad for you, Alabama, and I feel bad for you, Florida and Missouri, but get a better attorney general. Like the National Institute of Health grants, I know, I've heard that, you might have read this, that Senator Katie Britt from Alabama was freaking out because the University of Alabama is the biggest, job creator for the state of Alabama. And by cutting the number of their grants drastically, the unemployment rate in that state was going to rise dramatically. But what she did is she had to go behind the scenes and plead and beg with the president not to cut all this programming in her state, because her state attorney general would not sue the president or sue the federal government. And I think that's problematic. That's not a way that you can conduct business, is like, who's going to go behind the scenes and beg and plead with the president to please spare their state. In my opinion, you got to file a lawsuit. But in many of those cases, as I suggested, the relief that's granted will only go to the states that have sought it and not to others. Now, there will be possibly nonprofit organizations, or in some instances, like the federal firings, their unions, or other parties that might have standing who can bring a case that would apply to those states potentially. But in many of these cases, it will only be that the states with Democratic AGs get to have that kind of relief. And that's why I should tell you, Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania and Governor Beshear in Kentucky have found themselves in a really difficult place, because they're both Democratic governors that really want to fight the president for this critical funding for their states, but they have Republican AGs that refuse to do so. And so it's very problematic, because both of them were AGs before they became governor, and they desperately want to be part of these lawsuits, but in many instances they can't be. And that's bad for those states. I feel bad for them, but fortunately, that's not an issue here.
Hi, Attorney General. I just want to say that in Kalamazoo Portage, there were over 5,000 people at our 1.1 mile demonstration. And we trained people to be peaceful and wear pink peace vests. And I want to thank you for protecting the Jewish students on campus that were threatened and afraid to leave their rooms at U of M. And so good pace. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had it.
Somebody right now too, right?
Right here, yeah. Sorry, I keep on telling him that I'm going to stand up.
I'm Tim Barnick, and my question is pretty straightforward. When these cases eventually win their way to the Supreme Court, how confident are you that the Supreme Court will actually be willing to significantly rein in Trump?
Excellent question. Here's what I don't understand, is that when we finally heard the Chief Justice pipe up recently, it was after many, many times that you had President Trump, Vice President Vance, Elon Musk, and many others demean the federal courts. And I remember listening to his press secretary, the president's press secretary, say, like, the president, the executive, doesn't have to comply with these low-level courts, meaning the federal district courts. And I hate to break it, of course, to the press secretary, but the executive is still beholden to federal district courts until or unless they are successfully appealed to a court of higher jurisdiction, right? So it doesn't matter. And again, please, no one can call a federal district court judge a low-level judge. They don't like that. And remembering, of course, that we've had dozens of these cases where injunctive relief has been granted, and it's not just, judges that have been appointed by Democrats. Many, many of them are Reagan appointees, Bush 1 and Bush 2 appointees, and in several cases, Trump appointees. So the executive must abide by those rulings, but in terms of when those cases make their way up to the United States Supreme Court, certainly I've had some disappointment already, right? I did not agree that all of these cases that involve any sort of funding should go to the Federal Court of Claims, but in cases where we don't have independent claims, that is what we'll do. We'll continue to litigate these cases in a different court. In terms of the very disturbing, very concerning set of circumstances where we have seen Venezuelan immigrants, many of them that we now know were here totally legally, and if they were not here, if they did not have legal status, many of them, most of them, not having committed any crime at all whatsoever, but shipped to a prison, not back in their home country. Normally when somebody's deported, it means you get deported back to the country of origin that you came from or that you were a citizen of. You don't go to a prison in a foreign country for an indeterminate length of time. That has never been the case, and let's not call it deportation. Let's call it what it is. It's kidnapping. The pro and con, or the positive or negative of it, is that, as disturbing as it was to me that the Supreme Court on their shadow docket, meaning their emergency docket, where you don't file pleadings, you don't file, formal briefs, the merits of it aren't heard by the court, where the parties get an opportunity to argue all of this. But the Supreme Court, on one hand, said we're not going to force the government to comply with the low-level district court's order that planes be turned around, or that a particular individual that we know was wrongly removed to El Salvador because he had total legal status, and there's no reason that he could not legally be in the United States, been vetted by the federal government, was known to the federal government. So they said, well, on one hand, we're not going to say that he's got to be brought back in 24 hours, but we will say that these individuals have a right to due process and under habeas corpus. And so since that time, what we've seen in courts in Texas and in courts in New York is those courts have said, no more just sending these people off to a prison in El Salvador without having a hearing where they have access to counsel, and you have to provide evidence that they in fact don't have a right to stay in this country or that they're a member of a gang. You have to provide evidence for, this Alien Enemies Act, right? Which of course has never been imposed during a time where we weren't at war with the country. We're certainly not at war with the Venezuelan gang. I think we can all agree with that. And you have to make your case to the court, and no more removing these people from the United States to El Salvador. So the good and the bad of it was, on one hand, do I think that they, that they should have interfered with this judge saying, bring that guy back, that you concede, you admit was wrongfully removed from the country? But on the other hand, they also provided what they should have all along, which is some measure of due process for these individuals, which again, they are entitled to under the law. That is the law. So I think that we can expect to see a lot of our more beneficial rulings from the district courts and the circuit courts overturned in ways that will make me unhappy. But on the other hand, I think that we're going to see some instances where they say, no, this is too far. You can't completely violate federal law and undermine the Constitution. And I have to say this, if they don't, it's really the death knell of the courts. They already, last year, by saying, oh, by the way, if you're president of the United States, you can't be charged with basically anything you do as president of the United States, no matter how egregious your conduct, no matter how illegal your conduct is. That was a very dangerous thing. But I think that the court has to exert its authority to at least say, we matter. Like, these laws are there, and you have to comply with them, and you have to abide by court orders. Otherwise, why do we even have courts? So, do I wish there was a different makeup of these courts? Yes, absolutely I do. Do I think we should support things in the future like term limits for justices? Yes. At the end of the day, I think it will help to mitigate some of the significantly illegal conduct that we're seeing from the executive branch right now.
So, I'd like to ask you yourself, how well can you sleep at night knowing that you are charging 11 peaceful protesters, one of whom wrist was broken by Ann Arbor Police Department, who were tear gassed and pepper sprayed, chemical weapons used on students on their own campus, a public university that they were peacefully occupying? How do you sleep at night knowing that those charges emboldened the Trump administration to arrest Mahmoud Khalil from his dorm in Columbia, disappear him to Louisiana, and then continue to follow suit by arresting and deporting hundreds, potentially thousands of other students across campuses in the United States, including 22 students at the University of Michigan who have recently lost their student visas, 4 students at Western Michigan University, the same university that you are choosing to take space in today. How do you sleep at night knowing that your actions directly embolden the Donald Trump administration to retaliate against students on their own campuses?
So that is a good question. Not that why do you sleep at night, but why did you take these actions? And again, I appreciate the question, but this is why this is a dialogue, and why it's so much better for you to come to these events and ask me that question, and I answer that question, than to just scream and yell in a way that's interfering with having an event like this, which unfortunately is something that we've seen all too much from some of the protesters. I think it undermines because when you're interrupting having a dialogue, that's how you get people, to come to appreciate the importance of whatever the cause is that you're trying to support. So I'm happy to answer that question. Firstly, I think it's important to know that, I personally reviewed all of the evidence in these cases. 2 of the people you're talking about were not charged with anything related to peaceful protesting. They actually were charged with property-related crimes, where they had destroyed property, and they've already pled guilty to those crimes, you should know. So they're not even still in the court system. None of them, by the way, all of these people are American citizens. Why does that matter? I don't know. I mean, again, I guess we've had situations where the Trump administration has said they'll even deport American citizens, but that's going to be a whole lot of us, probably including me, if it's anybody who displeases the Trump administration. But here is where I come to that. First of all, again, I watched all of those videotapes. I don't know if you had an opportunity to did you go to court and see all the evidence that was presented?
I've been to court multiple times, and I was there on the day that my comrades and my students and my friends were brutalized and beaten by Ann Arbor Police Department.
Okay, well, while I can't get why I'm prohibited, because the cases remain pending, from getting into all the facts of the case, I will just repeat the fact that no one is charged with peaceful protesting, and we are talking about with the 9 people where their cases remain pending, we're talking about an event where people were given multiple opportunities to leave a certain area over and over and over again, but in defiance of the police who were trying to do their job that day, refused to do so. And again, all of this evidence is being presented in open court. We'll start with a preliminary exam to see whether or not the judge finds probable cause to bind that case over to trial. And then, again, this is the great thing about due process, there will be a jury of 12 people from Washtenaw County who will review the evidence, and only if all 12 of them agree that the people have proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt will there be convictions. So they are provided all of this due process that Trump doesn't afford people, but the state of Michigan does. But let me move on to the next point. Like, if you prosecute people, aren't you risking having something, detrimental happen to those folks, right? And I would make the case that for all of us, whether you are somebody out there who is protesting, as again, we had thousands and thousands of Michigan residents who were out there protesting, whether you are people who are making your voices heard because you have disagreements with the government, whether you are a disfavored person by this administration because of your immigration status, because you are a trans person, because it could be a variety of things why this administration doesn't like you. My problem is this: I am law enforcement, and I can't look at a person and say, well, I believe that you have committed a state law infraction, but because you are undocumented, I'm not going to charge you. I'll only charge people who are documented or who are American citizens. I can't do that. It would be so unfair for me to make that calculation. The same way that I can't say, well, if you're a person who is, supports, who considers himself to be a pro-Palestinian protester, I'm not going to charge you, but if you are a pro-Ukrainian protester who engages in the exact same conduct, I will charge. I mean, I can't do that. I just have to evaluate, have you violated state law? And if so, I have to treat everybody the same. So I can't look at cases and say, I'm not going to charge you because I'm afraid that the Trump administration might do something that is bad to you later, because how could I do my job that way? I just can't. And so that's why I base my decisions on 3 things: the facts, the law, the evidence. And that's it. And I think that's what a prosecutor should do.
Hi, first I just want to say that I'm really thankful that I live in the state of Michigan. So, Nessel, I'm sure you're aware of some of the things other attorney generals in more Republican states do. I learned recently, trying to get rid of protections of 504s. I've had to contact friends in Texas to tell them to call their representatives because they're trying to get rid of rights of people with disabilities. So, and on that note, I'm a parent of a student in Kalamazoo with a disability who has an IEP. So I'm very concerned about everything with the Department of Education, and I'd like to get just a better sense of when we're talking about money and finances, because I feel like I've had some people say, well, it'll be fine, right? Because it's the law, and the law is students with disabilities have to get free and appropriate public education, right? So the states will be able to figure that out. But my concern is that don't we get money from the federal government? Isn't the Department of Education the ones who make sure our students have civil rights? You know, and I think a lot of people have been fired from the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education, and I think
All of them.
all of them? I thought there was like one.
There's an office in Cleveland that oversees the administration of all those IEPs for the state of Michigan. So if you have, let's say, a child who has been denied the opportunity to get an IEP or has an IEP and they're not getting their proper programming, if the schools fail to provide it, it is this Cleveland office that oversees that to make sure that you can file a complaint with them. They will investigate, and if that child has been improperly denied the programming, they'll make sure that they receive it. They're all gone now.
Yeah, so, because I've had, you know, people I know say they'll, you know, find some video that goes with whatever their belief is to say, oh, it'll be fine, because see, I'm a professional, I know that, like, you know, it's the law, so they follow up. I'm like, yeah, but if someone breaks into your house and there's no police officers or there's no lawyers or anyone to represent you, then it doesn't really matter if there's a law in place for that. So when I'm speaking for a lot of other parents out there, because I know a lot of them who also have students with IEPs. My son has Down syndrome, so I'm with that community, and I see them post, like, they are very concerned. They're like, is this my last IEP I'm gonna have with my child? So that's a major concern, and I don't know how much more you can speak on that, or where, on the state level, where we're, you know, getting our funds to make sure those things are actually happening. And I will say, I think she left, but she asked about the SAVE Act too, and I kind of wanted to go back to that because I don't think that was addressed as much with that earlier, because we're getting a lot of information from our representative that again, that information is like, it'll be fine, guys. You just need to have your ID, they're lying to you or whatever. And I recently saw that Heisiga wrote a letter to Jocelyn Benson because there were 15 people who, like, we were supposed to be really impressed that, you know, he found that or something. I'm just like, see, there are people who should be voting, and it's like, you know, no, the real issue is that there's not enough people voting, and this is gonna make it even harder.
So I'm gonna uplift, I think we have time for only one or two more questions. You guys have been great, thank you so much. And thank you to Attorney General for the generosity of her time. I wanted, so two pieces. One, the state budget. So yes, absolutely, as we articulated earlier, 42% of the state budget is federal pass-through dollars. So absolutely, dismantling the Department of Education is going to have an effect. It will have an effect on what we can do at the state level. We do not, even though our governor has been very prudent with putting money away in each budget for many years in a rainy day fund, we do not have a large enough rainy day fund to make up these state cuts that are being proposed at the federal level. I also want to say that in the House of Representatives at the state level, which is controlled by Republicans, they handed us a budget, a skinny budget with 92% cuts already that Representative Longjohn and I voted no on. We were given it 20 minutes in advance to review. So we thankfully have the Senate, and our counterpart, Senator McCann, will be doing negotiations over there on his budget. And then we've got the governor. So we've got three-legged stool. I am cautiously optimistic, but you do need to know that we do not have the capacity at the state level to fix this hole, if you will, if the feds pass this down. So engaging with your congressman, particularly ours, is really critical and really important. In regards to the SAVE Act, so we have our own issues, again, at the state level. The floor leader, Representative Brian Posthumus, introduced a resolution that basically mirrors, not exactly, but mirrors some of these federal things. And so we are, and this is already passed out of committee, I believe. I'm not on that, I don't sit on that policy committee, but we are waiting and watching and monitoring that. But I'm very concerned about that piece at the state level. Again, the positive in Michigan is we have divided government, and we'll probably be relying on our Democratic friends in the Senate to help us on that issue.
Can you remind people people in that student budget, how much money in total was the Department of Attorney General to receive?
That would be 0.
I mean, is that a serious proposal? I mean, the state would go bankrupt in a week without lawyers to defend the state against all the litigation. But, I mean, these aren't serious people who make a proposal to zero out the budget of the Department of Attorney General.
As well as DHHS.
Yeah, all of the Department of Administrators as well. But I'm gonna say this because, you know, the cases that get investigated by the Michigan Department of State, the Secretary of State's office, in terms of voter fraud, then get forwarded to my office. So I end up handling those cases. And yes, certainly, you know, the Secretary did an exhaustive search. And in the 2024 presidential election, remember, there's approximately 5.7 million people who voted, and they were able to discern that some 15 of those people were non-citizens. So if you could do your math for just a second, so really what that means. Now, I'm not saying I'm not happy about any non-citizen voting. I'm not. It's not right, it's not fair. But with that, when you're talking about potentially disenfranchising what could be hundreds of thousands of people who don't have a birth certificate that matches their name, I just had one of these events in Detroit last weekend, and unfortunately, I'm not going to speak to the Kalamazoo County Clerk's Office, which I'm sure is important, but having spent much of my career working in Wayne County, I can tell you this. First of all, not so easy to get a birth certificate if you are somebody who's 70 years old or 80 years old. And secondly, there are so many people that have been married. Some people have been married and divorced more than once. They are not going to have a birth certificate that they can find anywhere that matches their name. Extremely problematic for a lot of people to be able to vote if you're not able to access that. And I think we heard actually from Congressman Waller just recently that if you can't afford the $200 to pay for a passport, then you shouldn't be able to vote at all. And that's called poll tax, right? I mean, that's flagrantly illegal. So it's a considerable problem, but it is a a solution in search of a very minor problem. And again, I don't like the fact that 15 people voted who shouldn't have voted, but should we disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of people, maybe even more than that, in order to ensure that we don't have 15 people who are violating the law? And I would say this, that's statewide, so we don't have information that any of those people that, had they not voted, they would change the results in any election, even the most local election. We don't have proof that it changed the results of any of those elections. And you're never gonna have a perfect system, but to take the system that we have, and in order to address those 15 people, we disenfranchise all those people. I mean, I think it's unconscionable, and I mean, it's really a concerning set of circumstances. And I will say this has been reviewed. The Heritage Foundations for years has been reviewing the voter rolls, which are public, right? Anybody can look at them. They've not found evidence that there is anything but a handful of people who should not have voted but did vote in any of their elections. And there was another review that was conducted one by the Georgia Attorney General, the Republican Georgia Attorney General, and one by the Republican Ohio Attorney General. And they came to the same conclusions because they could, in their states, only find a handful of people who were non-citizens who had voted in even presidential election years.
This is our last question for the evening.
Hello. Caleb Leonard, local veteran, Miss Representative Rogers, good to see you again. Great to meet you, Mr. Attorney General. If you bear with me, I'm a little bit nervous. I spent 14 years in the military, not allowed to use my First Amendment right in this scenario. So it's kind of a big deal. Some of the stuff that I'd like to highlight is kind of for everybody. And I would like to ask you first, if you would prioritize for me personally, following through all your priorities, first with safety, then with children, and then education. I can't speak up. It's just a little awkward. So with that, first, would you commit to that as a priority list? How you do it? We've elected you, go at it, but just keep those priorities. There's a step of some other stuff that I've been noticing for a long time, being in between, working with the politicians, working with, because I also worked in local government and engineering. I've been an engineer a long time, and it's just a system issue for me. We're all asking and yelling, and the point of protest is for us to say, we got to do something, but it has to still be a we, and we as the people still need to coordinate, use teamwork, and send a consistent message, because while we had 4,200 people at the mile-long protest, we had like all a common theme, but it was very hard for people to get that theme, up anything more than the theme, when they were driving by in crazy traffic, which that was a planning thing. We got to work together. People are going to get annoyed and then not spend time reading our message. We're working really good. I think it's great. I'm going to start with the analogy that we are all in the country and the government of a car. Politics is figuring out who's going to drive. And who drives at different times is going to burn out or redline our engine. Sometimes we just need somebody to drive and pull us in for maintenance, because we got 3 other people in there who can help change the tires, the oil, and the light. We're in a crisis, so we have to figure it out. We're in the defensive, so we have to prep for the next offensive, and we need that government to work well. We have to exercise our rights, not just have them, because without exercise or routine, we can't use it effectively. We have to get what I like to say, First Amendment swole, because communication is the first step. And if we can build our communication, we can communicate how to solve all of the subsequent steps. I actually worked a master's on this as far as bridging the gap between this. So please, we need to safety first. We need to make sure people aren't getting to life-threatening stuff. Hold it, please. Okay, let's stand next time. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. We're rushing. And then, so safety, let's focus on the stuff, because my neighbors are losing their Social Security benefit adjustments. They're losing vouchers because the federal grants, it's going to take a few months, but when are we going to lose the benefits? All right, we got a neighbor working off of like $653 trying to work the vouchers, can't get the process going because his job process he's been waiting on for 6 months so he can earn $300 to fix his car. I mean, these are direct impacts, and we've been working on it for a year, and then it's gone. Our veterans impacts, my mental health providers are now getting stuck in a 6-person office in bumfuck, sorry. And when I'm trying to pour out my soul from, some of my service, that doesn't help. If my mental health providers are stressed out, if I can't get a hold of the suicide hotline, and it's not just about me, I want to say this for the people in the government system, because we're people. And I say we, because we're all a team. We all have a process. We're out here, we get to be loud. Hopefully we get to be focused. We have all sorts of stuff. I'm going to bring it back. Mr. Fred Rogers said, when everything's going crazy, look for the helpers. And I see them around the room. We only need 3.5%. We have 4,200. All we need is another 4,200, and we've got about the 3.5% we need in this county with 272,000 people. So if we all just commit to committing our 6th group, we all, between the 6 of us, find one more person to get on board and then show up and then communicate and work together, we can send these people with a mandate, not just do something, but do this thing we all agree is going to work, so that when you're going to give this voice, we can back you up. We're not just signing a protest, we're showing up at the right times, at the right places to achieve the max effect. And I want you to help us. We're on the right step. This is the first step. Go up.
These are all excellent points that you made. I want to just sort of, we got to wrap up. So I want to say this. Yes, obviously we talked about talking to your representatives, and everybody knows that. But here's who else you have to talk to. Everybody you know. Everybody in your networks. You have to be communicating with your neighbors and your family members and with, people at your church. And, every single person, you have to be pointing out to them, you think this doesn't affect you, but yes, it does. Here's how. And here's all the people that I know that have been impacted. And here are the ways that they've been impacted. And here's why it's only a matter of time. If you haven't been impacted, just wait, because it will. It will. And I say, like, the one thing that we all have in common, we all put money into the Social Security system, right? And we are already seeing significant issues with that system. And that is going to impact some of us right away, but others of us, it's only a matter of time before it does. We literally all have that in common, every single one of us, but there's lots of other things that we have in common. And I will say with the NIH grants, the CDC, the public health grants, we all have in common, like none of us wants to have Ebola. Can we all agree that none of us, maybe there's one of you that's like, my lifelong dream. I mean, we have all of these things in common, right? We really do want to take care of our neighbors, our friends, our family, our state. But we have to share those stories so that every single person, even the people that, really, they are really bought into their support of the president, and they don't want to do anything that contravenes the things that he's doing, because then it looks like maybe they were wrong. And we have to let them know it's not about being right or wrong, it's about protecting the people of our state and protecting our loved ones and protecting our country and making sure that we still have, we still want to have a country that we can all rely on for our basic needs, our basic necessities, and most of us still want it to be a democracy. Right. Let's talk about something that is really important that we get to. Let's go back to talking about the Insurrection Act. Because what is going to happen is this: more and more of us are going to be showing up at these events. And even though hopefully they will remain peaceful and lawful, and obviously we don't want to get in the way, we don't want to be impeding traffic, that doesn't help anybody. We want to have these protests be properly permitted. But eventually what will happen is President Trump will invoke the Insurrection Act, and that means that he can use the National Guard. Basically, the governor is stripped of her authority, and he can mobilize the National Guard and, of course, active members of the military to try to quell or quash civil unrest, is what they will call it, even if it's being done peaceably and lawfully. And the important thing that we need to tell these members of the National Guard and these members of the military are a few things. First of all, for those of you who are veterans, you need to convey a message to those folks, which is that, you know what, it's not worth it. Don't go out there and shoot your friends and family and your grandparents in the street and undermine your oath to protect our country from enemies, both foreign and domestic. Those enemies are not all of us. We are not the enemy of America, right? We are Americans. And we just want what we're entitled to, whether it's the protection of our rights or, our own money that was properly appropriated through Congress. But for the veterans, you need to say it's not worth it. Like, don't train your weapons on all of us. Don't fire your weapons on us for a person who doesn't care about you. And when you are out of the service, is going to throw you away like a piece of garbage. Like he's done to so many veterans already. And that is the message that we need to convey. Peaceful protests, as many people involved as possible, all of us, to tell our community members that this impacts all of us, and we all need to take responsibility for it in terms of being an active part of resolving this. And we can do it, but we have to do it together.
Amen.
out tonight. Again, one more round of applause for University for being our host, and our staff, both the Attorney General staff and my own staff, spent quite a bit of time putting this all together, so thank you to all of them. And if any of you need help, our offices are at the ready. My email is julierogers@house.mi.gov, and you can Google us or 517-373-1783. Good night and be safe. Thank you.
All right.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.